Good morning, or it is Friday the 26th of May here. It's the penultimate day of the ISPA Congress in Montreal. So I'm just going to do a quick summary of what happened in the day yesterday on Thursday. It was quite a packed day. We started off in the morning, we had the pitch new work session and then the expo that kind of took us into lunch. And then we had two sessions in the afternoon of discussion before a group of us in the evening went to see Cirque du Soleil's Volta down at the harbour side. Now, I did a separate video about Volta, which is hopefully online now, but in short, I recommend going to see it. But yeah, so yesterday we opened with the pitch new work sessions. Now, in terms of that, it's very much kind of pitching work for large scale investment and for large scale touring, which in terms of my organisation at the Barbican is not a large organisation. It's not a situation where I'm in a position, or my organisation are in a position to propose to receive any of this work or co-produce it or support it in those kind of ways. But it is interesting from an artistic perspective and from a producing perspective to see the project being proposed and the scale of the work that's out there. And and there were 10 pieces pitched in total, and we'd heard about previous success stories from the Congress in New York where pieces have had a further life. There were 3 pieces in particular that I felt stood out to me on a personal level. So the first one was a piece called Bosch Dreams, which takes its influence from the work of Hieronymus Bosch. In the pitch presentation, which was only 7 minutes to present, there was a video package put together, and it really put across the visuals of the piece and the kind of aesthetic style of using Bosch's work and Bosch's art. The video showed live use of animation in the performance of that artistic style, and just from an audience perspective, really kind of drew you in. So that looked really fascinating. Also, King Arthur's Knight was another pitch that was presented to us. A piece that's being created in Canada, and it uses a fully integrated cast. And one of the co-creators of the piece is somebody who's got experience of living with Down syndrome, and the piece is kind of developed in a way through how he sees the world, and just the way it was presented was so slick, but also just sounded really engaging and really kind of heartwarming, and like the visuals again, the production shots they showed, the promotional shots, looked incredible, and just the way it was kind of sold across to us. And other organisations, other programmers stood up and said about the quality of the work as well, of their previous work. So we'd love to kind of see that piece and just the idea of how they approach that story sounds really great. And then the final piece that I really liked the sound of was the Storyville Mosquito. It's developed by Kid Koala, who's a musician who, amongst other things, he's worked on a lot of films, but includes the Scott Pilgrim vs. the World movie, which is like my favourite film of all time. So kind of hearing his name and hearing the reference to Scott Pilgrim and seeing this piece of work was like, this sounds cool. It uses this kind of very cool aesthetic again. It's kind of got live music and live DJing. I mean, Kid Koala said about his influences are like Jim Henson and Charlie Chaplin, which are just like crazy influences. But it just sounds so cool. And there's this idea of there's a journey through the piece. There are like 3 sections to the performance that each have a kind of slightly different way, and it's all kind of integrated, and the way the performance piece is handed over to the audience quite a lot, which sounds like a great experience, and again something I'd love to be able to see and be a part of. So yeah, there's some cool pitches that went there. I mean, in terms of the afternoon sessions, there were a couple of subjects that were presented. So one of them was about new practices to cross borders, and this idea of working across different locations, and in particular different cultures and different countries. So there was conversation about the use of digital to link physical spaces, so kind of having 2 live physical audiences but bringing them together through the use of digital, but not letting each individual audience lose their identity, which I think is really important. The use of digital can sometimes forego the live experience, and actually you kind of want to use both the digital and the live experience and bring them together. So that was kind of good to hear somebody saying about not losing that liveness and not losing that audience identity. It was also mentioned about, if you go to a different culture, you need to take the time to listen to the people there and understand their culture and not just impress your own on there. Despina from Punch Drunk was there talking about them doing Sleep No More in China, and there was a good example of that, was saying, you need to take the time to understand the ways of that culture, and there were things where the way in which China works was perceived in one way by the company, and naturally it's very different to our European way of working, but actually with time realising that that the kind of the beliefs and the values you assign to that style of working are not necessarily accurate. Once you get to understand the culture, you kind of see how it works, which is good to kind of hear. And the second session was about asking questions about oral stories universal. So there were it was quite an in-depth conversation. At points there were bones of contention, I think it's safe to say, were raised, and I think sometimes things were lost in translation, or maybe didn't get put across as clearly, and obviously things were misinterpreted. But there was the question of there were kind of different identities in terms of making a piece of work. There's an identity of the piece of art, but there's also identity of the place in which you present it. And also who your audience are. So you kind of need to weigh up all of these things together and not just see them as one kind of homogenous identity, but go, actually, there's more to consider. And also the understanding that audiences can work in different ways. So culturally, audiences can react to different things. It was mentioned that in Brazil, for example, for a piece of work, an audience will stand up immediately and give a large ovation, but for a very short length of time, like 10 seconds, and they sit down. Whereas other places, people will sit, but they will applaud more slowly, but for much longer. It's interesting to hear those kind of stuff. As a personal point of reference, which might be a bit sad, is that I'm a fan of professional wrestling, and there's differences between kind of Western audiences and Eastern audiences. So, for example, in Japan, audiences are very quiet until the end of a match, whereas in the Western, in the US and the UK, audiences are much more vocal and engaged the whole way through. And it's a form of live performance. I think that's a relevant kind of comparison to make. But it is interesting to kind of understand that the reaction doesn't necessarily dictate what people feel about the piece of work. So, having that vocalised and verbalised in these sessions is really interesting and puts that into people's minds, but maybe they don't necessarily think about it when they're working in their own unique context. So, there's a lot of usual kind of, as usual, a lot of provocation that comes out, and watching the piece of work in that way. And actually, is in a way, we were also saying about going to see Cirque du Soleil in the evening, and at the end there was a standing ovation, and the performers came out into the audience and were very much in the audience. Right in there, going around giving high fives to kids and all that kind of stuff. We were saying you don't really see that kind of stuff in the UK. You don't see a performers that kind of technically break the fourth wall and go and have that closeness to audience members. So maybe that's specific to the piece of work, and maybe that's specific to the audience who are here. But it was, it's interesting to kind of flag those things up. So again, the usual kind of provocations that have been firing off from that last day. It definitely felt like the most kind of broad and diverse day, I think, particularly because it was the first full day of the Congress, whereas the first day had started as kind of half day, and we'd already had the Anthony Field Academy in the morning. So it was good to kind of get into it, and there was a lot of kind of conversation that was provoked afterwards as well. But it was also nice to be able to go and see a show in the evening, so to kind of put all of that learning, I guess, into some kind of context of performance. So we've got the final day today. We go to a different venue. I've got a few more sessions, and then we have our kind of reception event in the evening as well. So as we kind of get ready for the final day tomorrow, at which point I fly back to the UK overnight, which will be joyous. There's another bit of insight into what the last day was like. So this is the longest video so far, but I'm still going to keep it quite tight, and less than 10 minutes. If you don't know, on social media, there's been a lot of postings going on. It's using the hashtag ML17 ISPA or the hashtag identities. They're both being used for the Congress, so you can follow the conversation online. Plus Arts, and I've been retweeting and tweeting quite a lot of stuff, as have the ISPA account on Twitter as well. So obviously, if you're interested in kind of finding out other views as well, then do kind of click on those hashtags. Other fellows here as well have been posting quite a lot on various social media platforms. So if you're interested from external, or if you're here and you want to see different perspectives, then check those hashtags out and try and find those people who've been talking about it as well. So we've got the new venue today, so head off to that and see how that day goes. Just a little cheeky final plug as well. In the meantime, whilst all this is going on, I produce Plymouth Fringe Festival, which opens next Monday in Plymouth in the UK. We're pulling it all together. It's quite weird being in a different country working on that, but it's quite exciting that we're going to start again. It's our third year on Monday. So if anybody happens to be in Plymouth in the UK over the next week, or generally just interested in the festival, then do get in touch. You can visit plymouthfringe.com for more information, or you can drop me a line. Obviously that's coming up next week, but the last couple of days of the ISPA Congress now in Montreal before flying back. So looking forward to that. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.